No, I think one of our panelists is a little bit late, but hopefully Jeffrey will join us. If not, I'm sure we can all keep the conversation going. And this is meant to be a panel. We have some of our own thoughts, but we'd love to hear from you, and especially hear your burning questions about corporate venture capital. So this is the corporate venture capital panel. We'll all introduce ourselves, but I also feel like this could be called alternative strategies for accessing early stage innovation, right? Because you have from our side, what we're looking for, and then when we have from the startup community, what the startup community is looking for from corporate venture, but now that really means something different for every single company, as you'll hear up here. And I think what's awesome this year at this conference on this panel is you don't see the typical, pharma folks up here just kind of pitching what they're looking for in strategic alignment with early stage companies. I think each one of us, brings a pretty unique perspective to how we think about the venture landscape in terms of being a strategic or a corporate venture group. So maybe let's start at the far end with Harold, and then we'll get going with the conversation. But just introduce yourself and your firm and your focus.
Okay, I'm Harold from Bayersdorf in Germany, a German-based skincare company. So we are dealing with all sorts of technologies regarding to skin. So from wounds to scars to skin diseases, dry skin, to the very edge of the cosmetics, also making skin more beautiful. So in terms of investment, we invest out of our balance sheet. We see ourselves as strategic investors. Sizes vary from, let's say, 200K to around 5 million. We're aiming early stage investments from seed to Series A, and of course we can bring a lot to the table. We have an extensive manufacturing network. We are about a 20,000 people company with 7 billion euro turnover, 1,000 scientists all over the world with very well-known brands in the skincare area, from Aquaphor and Eucerin here in the United States, Futuro, braces, pain relief products, and Nivea and La Prairie on the very other side.
Thank you. Jeffrey, back to you. Go ahead.
No worries. No, I'm sorry about that. My name is Jeff Yim. I am part of Northwell Health Ventures. We are the corporate venture arm by Northwell Health. Northwell Health is the largest health system in New York State. We have 23 hospitals, over 650 ambulatory sites ranging from doctor practices, urgent cares to skilled nursing facilities throughout the New York region. We were formed through the merger of North Shore LIJ back in the late 90s, and now actually own a number of different hospitals across Long Island and the 5 boroughs, including Lenox Hill on the Upper East Side here. In terms of, we have $11 billion not-for-profit health system, totally integrated delivery network, 66,000 employees. We're the largest employer in New York State here. As part of Northwell Ventures, we are the corporate venture arm that does two things. We do corporate carve-outs and corporate development projects for Northwell in terms of capabilities, assets, services that we provide internally or as a cost center that we wish to spin out or commercialize externally with either startups or private equity-backed companies or even private equity themselves. Otherwise, my second job, in some ways more fun, is the venture capital portion, in which we invest off the balance sheet. Like some of my colleagues here, we have a quote-unquote $50 million fund that we invest in technologies, what I call outside in, things that we want to bring into the system that we want to partner with our capabilities. Specifically, it has to be championed by a clinician or an operating person inside who thinks that this is the best thing since sliced bread. I like to say that we have to be buyers before investors, so that this is something that we want to utilize and help either our patients increase our revenue or decrease our costs. So it really has to, go to the strategic aim of the system at large. We invest between $250 to $5 million from seed to Series A, or I'm sorry, Series B. Less so on the seed side now because it takes a lot of resources, but more Series A to Series B. And what we're really looking for is partnership with new technologies, more than just a typical vendor-client relationship, a much more expansive partnership together.
Great, thank you. Nir.
Hi, I'm Nir Arbel. I'm the operating partner for Esco Ventures. ESCO Ventures is the venture arm of a company called ESCO Micro, which is a Singaporean-based company, which does medical and life science research equipment, very basic broad equipment, refrigerators, incubators, life safety cabinets. It has a network in over 100 countries around the world, and the venture arm is meant to kind of transform the company or the portfolio of the company into more advanced technologies. We have core fields of investment, which are either women's health or life science tools, but we have been venturing out into opportunistic different areas. The Ventures itself has a corporate office in Singapore, but also in Boston and Beijing in China, so we are able to bridge the borders, and we invested typically around $200,000 to $5 million, early stage to Series A.
Hi, so I'm Claire Laurent. I work for Samsung Venture, I'm an investor there. So we are an independent entity, but we're part of the Samsung conglomerate. And we invest for strategic advantage for one of our business units. So it means that we only invest when there is a strategic fit with one of our BU. Our BUs are our LPs. We currently have 2 billion under management, and we've had a presence in mostly in tech, but as you may know, Samsung is a very diverse entity, and we also do appliance, mobile, and we have a presence in healthcare, remote healthcare. More recently, and it's less known that we have smaller, more younger entities that are into wet biology. So we have a biosimilar company, BioVis, that's been created 7 years ago and has been executing on their biosimilar plan very well, so that they currently have a number of products on the market progressing very quickly, and in that effort trying to reach other therapeutics platform, and investing is seen as a way to explore other R&D areas. And we also have a very large manufacturing plant that is considered number 1 in terms of capacity for biologics production, and the name of the company, which is actually the parent of the other one, is Samsung Biologics. And so, because these 2 entities, and because bio represents the future for Samsung today, we are raising internally large funds. So our presence, if you look us up, is very modest. We actually have no investment yet in bio. I joined the company a year ago, and so we've been working on our strategy and fundraising activities. We'll be very active in the future. And we have a focus on cell therapy, gene therapy, next generation biologics, and of course, everything that is tech related that you would think of as for us first.
Thank you. And I'm Jenna Foger. I'm a senior vice president of our Alexandria Venture Investments group. So I'm based here in New York, but Alexandria Venture Investments is a national company. We're a real estate investment trust. We're publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange. And our business model is pretty unique, just like all of my colleagues sitting up here, but we're a real estate company that focuses on owning, operating, and developing real estate in the core biotech hubs across the country. So on the West Coast, Seattle, San Francisco, San Diego, and on the East Coast, Greater Boston, New York being our newest market, Maryland, and down in North Carolina around the Research Triangle Park area. So our venture investments business is similarly right off of our balance sheet. We have close to $1 billion right now that we manage in our venture arm exclusively, and it's all strategic. So what we mean by that is we're looking to be a partner in the innovation ecosystem in each one of our regions. We want to support early stage companies. We want to access innovation. We want to understand and learn about the latest trends to make us smarter on the real estate side by understanding what is at the cutting edge of life science. And we want to expand our network across the country, and it's really been a huge part of our business pretty much since inception almost 25 years ago. So going back to the panel, when we think about sourcing innovation, we kind of have at Alexandria this interesting overlap that we get to see through the lens of real estate. And so we access a lot of our venture investments through groups that are coming to us looking for real estate or through kind of different networking activity across our regions. I'm curious, for maybe Harold, starting with you, but accessing innovation, how are you sourcing it? And how do you know it when you see it?
sourcing, actually we take more or less this three-dimensional approach. Let's say we work with agents, providers, about 1/3 of that, let's say desk research, with the data platforms and things like that. And we go to events like this type of conference and also other ones on a global level from Asia to Europe and Israel, United States. And then the third one is, of course, the network. VCs, family offices, seed angel investors. That's basically the sources. We have a strategy. We have 6 search fields defined, from new materials to fermentation, biotech, and stuff like that, where we look into. And then, of course, we try then to get it, and we are approached, of course, from a lot of startup and technology providers. We work together with accelerators, incubators, also in the different regions in the world, and this gives us plenty of opportunities to look into. And then we have a process in our company where it goes through various stages, from, let's say, pitch deck evaluations down to presentation, and then through an investment committee to an investment, and then we build cross-functional teams around every investment, because the ultimate goal is to bring a new product to the market. That's our aim at the end of the day. We don't see ourselves as financial investors. We really want to see a product or a service or an entire new business model in the market. That's our aim.
So how do you think, Claire, how do you think about sourcing? How do you think about, and this is really for everyone, how do you think about how early is too early? You're seeing so many things. How are you, making cuts or focusing?
These are 2 different questions.
Answer either one in any order.
How do I think about sourcing? I have you probably will hear a fear of missing out. Like, I want to be aware of the next big deal, and if I'm not aware, I will find out. So we are very open to any channels, like email, conferences, talking with academies, talking with other VCs, colleagues. So we want to be aware, and usually we're pretty welcoming when they come to us. So very often, like in media, reading something about something. And sometimes it's passive sourcing, sometimes it's active sourcing in the specific areas. Now about, is it too early? It really depends on the phase you have in some kind of ideas or platforms. Going early is a lot of work for the investor as well to help the company grow. And so if you have that level of phase or ability, we'll certainly make the way with you. Sometimes it's just a question of management, that we have to see the opportunity kind of shaping into a data set or a product, depending on what we're talking about, and then we're able to maybe be more helpful at that time.
Fair enough. Any perspective on this? And also when you think about early being too early, when you think about the team in place versus the technology in place, maybe some color on that.
Yeah. So for us, to add on top of what the others have mentioned, so we are so of course there's a lot of passive recruitment. We get probably 20, 30 pitch decks every week passively. And then what we do beyond that is we try to understand what are the unmet needs that we want to address. And then based on that, we source and we look for different technologies. In terms of how early, so there is no really how early. We do venture creation, which is, I guess, the earliest you can be at. So it really varies between, of course, the team is important. The team will always be important, but then the technology, it needs to be developed for whatever that stage is. So if it's very early stage, it doesn't necessarily need to be past clinical trials. It could be a proof of concept. But what most usually miss out on is addressing the market properly. That is really where many people fumble, and they don't either internally don't understand the market, or they don't present it well enough for us to understand. And because for us we are very opportunistic, so as I mentioned earlier, we look at women's health and we look at life science tools. In those areas, we understand the market very, very quickly, but anything outside of that, we don't understand the market necessarily quickly. And then if it's not explained properly, or we don't believe the story properly, then we would shut it down.
Interesting. Jeffrey, any color on this and, within your organization, how are you kind of making early cuts? And not wasting, your team's time, but also not wasting other people's times that are coming to you asking, for potential investment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for mainly a lot of our sourcing for a lot of our deals originally has been through our clinicians and operations folks who see product and, our key KOLs, they're key opinion leaders in their space of clinical practice or, operating, hospitals and, they're the ones trying to solve their problems. And it just so happens if a startup has a technology that solves their problems, then we can partner in some way, shape, or form. That's where we come in from a venture standpoint, so that we can, bring our sort of deal savvy, where we, the team, are from the outside of the organization, meaning we didn't grow up as hospital administrators or operators or clinicians. We are, deal people from Wall Street, and we bring that sort of capability to Northwell as a health system. So that's one way we've sourced deals is then get, as long as there's a clinical champion, that's really the biggest hurdle. If there's a clinical operational champion who says, this is really good, I'm going to buy it, I'm going to enter a commercial agreement, I'm going to have a contract with them, then it makes my job a hell of a lot easier. Other ways is other strategic venture funds, and every hospital system, I believe, almost has one nowadays, some sort of, they've made investments or have technology that they've commercialized internally, and they may be raising money for some things that they've already invested in or looking at investment. So there's a group of us as well as others that come together to kind of trade ideas. And so those are, again, sharing the diligence, sharing that sort of load, and build these consortium of systems that is really powerful in terms of, I call it king making. You can make a EMR or provider or some sort of device a king of that. If you have like 5 or 6 different health systems saying that they will not only back it but buy it, you're talking about forming some very interesting consortium. So those are the two main ways. And of course, outside venture capital, like we work a lot with GE Ventures and you name them, that sort of bring deals to us. And in terms of too soon, we did a couple of seed stage investments. We're good. The problem with those is it's a lot of work for us. I think a little bit of separations. Everybody else here has a manufacturer or they want to use it as a product line. From a strategic standpoint, ours is a little bit more indirect in the sense that we're not going to go out and sell it or buy this company later on. We're just going to use it and hope it goes bigger from a financial sense. So we're trying to merge the strategic with the financial into one entity, if you will.
Interesting. So even at this conference and very often, as we all do, we get asked the question, have you seen anything interesting lately? So yeah, in my job, I'm fortunate enough, if not weekly, to see some investment opportunity that looks interesting. But what does that, actually mean to you when you say, oh yeah, that's interesting, I'm going to really dig deeper and go deep on this? And not just in terms of, the team looks good, the technology looks good, but just give a little more color to the audience, about what interesting looks like to you in your organization, especially when, someone like you, Claire, has, a much broader scope that you can kind of choose from. So how do you think about that?
Yeah, for me it's interesting it can be interesting in 2 ways actually. One, it fits perfectly strategic objectives, and so I'm going to make one of my LP very happy because I'm bringing a solution to them via an investment, and I'm going to make the company in which we invest very happy because there's a potential partner right there. The other thing is quite the opposite. It doesn't match anything that's super specific, but there's an obvious disruption or invention or new market or new application for an existing technology. So that's more the aha, and I will have to, it's going to make my job a little bit more complicated. I have to try to map it somewhere. But what's easy if you have that kind of energy, you feel that it's bringing something, and so you don't have to pitch too much in theory.
Yeah, so I guess it's a very personal question.
Yeah.
Because
We're trying to get personal here. It's too relaxed.
So the answer is for me, not necessarily for the ventures itself. So I think what tends to happen maybe too often is that we kind of get numb looking at the same technologies or very similar technologies all the time. So what excites me usually is something that is different, something that I say, it could be very simple on how come no one ever thought about it so far, which is a very simple solution, and you look it up and you say, no, there must be something else, and there isn't. So that would excite me a lot, or something that is brand new technology.
I think it's somehow twofold. There's the technology pull part and the push part. The pull part, I think we know our actual markets very well, the consumer needs, and also can predict future consumer needs to, let's say, out of technology and consumer trends to the next 5 to 10 years. So we have a very clear picture what we would need in terms of, let's say, unmet consumer needs and unmet technology needs. That's the search part, and then we can easily judge interesting for us or not. The other part, the push part, is more, I fully agree with you, that's the excitement part. If something comes across the table which creates excitement, and we have around, let's say, 1,000 expert scientists, and somehow has to make them excited. And if there is really that passion and a little team created around an idea, and then it will make it to the market. That's the point. That's that push part. That's a very emotional thing, very personal thing. Yeah.
I agree, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I lean on the 66,000 employees we have. It's kind of good because they all have opinions on certain things, good and bad, on our process. But I think at the end of the day, for them, if it gets our clinicians super excited, this is something that they want to use, or it solves a problem, a key problem, and there's an easy pathway to get through our purchasing department, which I think is the biggest black box. So it's one thing to get clinicians excited, it's another thing to be able to get through the show either revenue. It's easy if there's something that generates revenue for us. I mean, then it's like there's a new CPT code or something like that. That's easy to get through because people understand. So if I buy this or use this, I can bill it. That's easiest. But if it's a true cost savings or something like that can be showed very easily, those two things that can get through our purchasing very quickly and show economic value to the system very quickly, as well as serve a clinical need. Those are the types of things I think that really excite us in terms of doing a deal, and it just very much easier, smooth pathway to adoption.
Interesting, and that kind of segues nicely to another topic that I want to cover. In terms of being a strategic investor or corporate, what do you really bring? Obviously, the strategic alignment, like we all say, but what does your firm actually bring to the investment, to the early stage company, that another just traditional venture investor might not?
And so that's why I like to say we're not just dumb money. Apologies for any venture capitalists sitting in the they might be able to bring in certain key relationships, but like I said, we have 66,000 employees who can bring so much. They're on the ground doing this day in, day out. And a lot of these technologies might be awesome, but if it doesn't fit our workflow, if it doesn't work in the ground from bed to bedside to the clinician actually performing it, if they have to go out of the EMR and come back in or do something like that and it disrupts their workflow, then we can very easily say, you need to fix this. So we bring, just product validation, research, like I said, kingmaker capability, because we can, much more easily help you access the, 20 or so largest IDNs across the United States, because we have personal relationships with them and say we're not only buyers but we're investors, so you can leapfrog, a year or two cycle in terms of selling to the health system, which is, a challenging task for startups. Again, product validation, and sometimes we get paid in sort of sweat equity, bringing our brand, bringing in our key clinicians who can push it during conferences and other things like that. So we bring I think a lot of value to the table, and we get compensated. And I'd say more than half of our deals we get some form of sweat equity, penny warrants, whatever, as long as we perform certain milestones. And they want us at the other cap table because it just enhances their value.
And Claire, maybe for you with Samsung, how do you interact with the parent organization and bring additional value?
Yeah. So what we would be able to bring will depend on the business unit we are going to work with. But for example, for pharma, because most of the assemblies probably from that field, there's strong expertise in manufacturing. The ability to advise or to deliver some of your manufacturing package preclinically is something that we can certainly offer. Some clinical development, project management, or in certain area of the world, especially in Asia Pacific. All the robustness of the corporate management of Samsung, which is very well recognized as a kind of quality corporation. So in the interaction, in the negotiation of such terms, some discussions with regard to the business, the market, the pricing will bring value, I believe, to the company we will invest in, because we basically will transition knowledge there. We will do that in some areas, but we do it in this area that we talked about, like pharma, web biology. And I'd say that to summarize, basically what Samsung's been good at is scaling up sophisticated technology, whatever the technology, whether it's mobile or other stuff, and it's the same in the biology and the pharma world. So basically we're hoping to help you. You come from a discovery or a smaller scaling place, and we can help you becoming bigger, not losing quality in translation. That's what we can offer, in addition to the investment.
What about either of you?
Additionally, beside what has been said, I think we can also leverage the technology usually across different industries in our partner network. So we are connected to lots of suppliers and customers, let's say from small to very big, and usually they have exposure into different industries. So technology which might be relevant to skincare can be also relevant to paints and coatings or to construction and things like that. And so we have, via our partner network, access to all these different industries, so we can make a much bigger business case out of it, and it's also in terms of investment, of course, much more interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah, I mean, just for us as a personal plug to Alexandria, I mean, I think a lot of people ask us often, oh, do you just place, your investments in your buildings? Is that the strategic value? Well, yeah, sometimes we can help with that, and especially in crowded markets like in San Francisco and in Cambridge, that really is, strategic value. But where we are most helpful, I think, is our network and the lens that we get, and understanding the movement and momentum within each region of this country in biotech, just the market intelligence that we have and our people network that we've been able to either place, inside companies or connect different, companies as a key resource that way, has really been the byproduct of the business, even more so than really placing, companies within buildings. So it's always interesting. And I think that I mean, obviously when there's, calling, and I always, air quotes, strategic alignment in terms of corporate venture, that's the obvious part, but I think these byproducts is what makes, this group more interesting as an investor overall. But Nir, anything else to add?
Yeah, just to add to that. So I think you're right. I think the network is probably the biggest strength of any corporate investor. So for us, it's because the parent company is connected in 100 countries around the world. So it's obvious we have that network. We are stronger in Southeast Asia and China. So China is obvious to most, for better or for worse. I think for Southeast Asia is a market that is often ignored. People don't realize the population size in Southeast Asia, and it really depends on what the opportunity is. Is it going to be cost effective for that region? But if it is, it's a huge market that many miss out on.
Interesting. So we have 20 minutes. I have many more questions, but anyone from the audience want to ask any questions of the panel? All right, we'll keep rolling. Maybe we'll spice it up a little bit, and we'll talk about what is the investment either that you made or that you saw colleagues make, and it could be in your current position or prior, but that was really a failure, but that you learned something from. That you saw something, either you actually made the investment or you got very close to making the investment, but you decided to pass last minute because of something that went wrong. Because I think often, we learn more from those investments that we either almost made or spent a crazy amount of time on and then ended up passing, or something happened, and even the successful ones.
When we started this investment journey, we tried to build up our own accelerator. So we invited startups into our facilities into Hamburg, Germany, and then of course they were exposed to all the corporate structures and SOPs and regulations and stuff like that. So we had them on our premises, and it went totally wrong. So instead of, let's say, learning from them how to simplify and our processes and get faster, it went the other way wrong. The other way, and we made the life of these startups dramatically difficult, and at the end of the day failed, and they were looking for other partners helping them to bring products fast to the market. So now we've changed that totally. We leave the startup in their ecosystem where they are, and only have eventually engagements, and we try to learn from them instead of they learn from us. We support them with all our infrastructure, but we try to learn from them.
Very interesting. And what do you think it was about bringing them into the ecosystem? Was the cultural fit or the capabilities?
The
of
culture,
function?
the cultural fit, and of course, suddenly we had competition from outside with our own scientists. There is the non-invented syndrome, which is very strong. If you have 1,000 experienced scientists sitting there, then suddenly somebody from the outside comes in, which is probably better in certain technologies. They try to make the life as difficult as possible. That's honestly spoken.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. Any other anecdotes?
Yeah, for us, we did, we tried to do a fast follower into China for advanced wound healing. So the two mistakes we did was both of that. So one was doing a fast follower in China is not what it used to be 5 or 10 years ago. It's much more competitive. The gaps have decreased significantly. So we figured that out too late. And then again, we did adventure creation into that with not understanding the space enough. So not understanding, well, the science we understood basically, but then it wasn't enough, and that understanding the market was not enough. And we realized after a year's work that it's just not going to cut it. So we shut the project down after a year.
Anything about system?
I think from a system, you have to be patient with us. I think we're not a venture capital with 5 partners that can make a decision in like 2 weeks. So if you're looking to close something in a month, probably you shouldn't talk to us. But if you have a larger, longer time frame and really value a strategic fit, definitely we can do something and work with our clinicians and everything. But it's a long process because we have to pass it to our clinicians and pass it to our investment committees and things. I think from learning from mistakes is that doing what I would term unfortunately political deals, I think are tough, and we're asked to underwrite certain things that I think might have strategic value to some people, but not the system as a whole. We got to be careful of that, and I think that we try to put processes in place to kind of make sure it passes through the objective views of the process before we do that. But definitely, you have to be mindful of the whole system.
It's too early to say.
Okay, good. Too early to say. Too early. Okay, we'll come back next year. We'll get you next year. No, hopefully you won't have any failures.
I don't have any failures.
No, you won't. You'll moderate next time.
Just
Yeah, of course.
So just one more point that I think most VCs don't do. They don't track their failures in the sense that good investments that they passed on. So I do try to keep tabs on
That's totally
whatever we
yeah.
passed on to see how they follow up, even if I thought it was the best idea in the world and eventually we didn't invest in. So especially on those tabs.
Well, to your point of FOMO, the fear of missing out, I mean, that's what drives, so many of us is what you're going to miss out on. And it is a failure on our part if we miss out.
And I think most don't do that follow-up enough to understand where, because to me that's just as well as a failure.
Completely agree.
But it's very frustrating.
Completely agree. Okay, so from failures to successes maybe, and I think the privilege of this panel and the group here is that we represent, we have skincare, health systems, health tech, health equipment, lab equipment, health equipment. I guess in your respective subsector, I mean, what are you the most excited about? What do you view as really on the cutting edge? I mean, we'll go down the line because there's so much going on in life sciences in general. But if we could really break it down a little bit more, I think that would be kind of interesting to hear.
Yeah, very quickly, well, biocorrection, I think not only being able to restore the functioning of a drug using like the product of life, whether they are cells from the patients or from, allogenic, or that's really interesting. Everything that's around CRISPR is, for me, still very risky in some ways, but I guess the ability to modify cells out and then re-inject it is really interesting. There are a lot of progress in the access aspect of these, because some of these discoveries are not like new, like they've been working on stem cells for a long time already. I think what's really interesting is that the field is moving in a way that's going to enable access to maybe probably a larger market and so patients.
And to me, there's nothing specific. To me, biology is exciting on its own. So I'm kind of agnostic to what is new or not, or whether it's stem cells or gene therapy, which is making it back, siRNA that's making it back. It's exciting if it makes sense and it's addressing the right unmet needs.
Microbiome is a very hot topic in our ecosystem. Say there are 2 kilograms of bacteria living in us and on us, and somehow determining us. The DNA is more than our own DNA, so you can question whether we are a human being or a microorganism, because they were here before us, so we adapted to them, not the other way around. And it will be after us. Most likely. So that's, let's say, the microbiome living obviously on our skin, how we can use that, how we can modify that, and also, of course, the gut microbiome. There is also a link to the skin. Healthy eating makes a beautiful skin. So there is certainly a link to that. This is one of the, and then personalization on the other side. Let's say, how can we personalize products in the connection with artificial intelligence, machine learning, sensors, and stuff like that. So this is, let's say, everything around big data.
Does that translate into your investment thesis? So
Yes,
you're looking for
yes.
companies?
We have investment into AI companies connected with microsensors, let's say, for making spread analysis and then personalized products in connection with that. So AI is certainly an investment topic for us.
Yeah, just echo the sentiment. I think AI, but real world applications within the health system. We invested in a company called Arteris. They started with a cardiac MRI capability of being able to do novel 4D flow and structural heart issue detection through the MRI. That usually would take an hour and a half. They've been able to shorten that to almost like 20 minutes, which is great. But what we really like about it, they had that one FDA-approved product, but what they were really building out was a platform. We are, our system, our IT systems are, overtaxed with just maintaining the system and bringing in new things and supporting those. So we couldn't have like an AI solution for this and then COPD and for this and for lung and for liver, but wanted a platform that you can plug in different algorithms, this being one, and they're developing others, and they could acquire others to plug into this platform. It's all web-based and cloud-based, so that you can send images to their cloud, have them process it and send it back to us, so we have no new investments in new servers and computing power, all that's sort of already outsourced, if you will, and it's a platform that we can implement versus just one point of care and things that would drive if you need like one for every single disease state, if you will, it would overwhelm our IT. So people like to say that the great technologies are this specific, but if it's not a true platform across, you'll have a very hard time selling it into the system or even getting adoption. So that's key for us.
How did you find that company?
Again, it was through both a clinician who had, does a lot of cardiac diagnosis and reading, and said this was a great AI technology, as well as they were already backed by GE Ventures, and so those two kind of confluence events, with that strong institutional, and then us as well, and then
Oh, interesting. And I actually didn't intend to talk about AI, and I think that in the other track, the AI panel is going on right now, but in terms of your own organizations, how are you thinking about AI? Samsung is, that's what you're thinking about, and everything else is just, crazy. But, how are you thinking about it in terms of the investments that you're making, and then making sure that you have, the right infrastructure in the back end to support that? I know for Samsung, it might be a little bit different, but just any color or, because I know that has changed, especially, we invest mostly on the investment side in therapeutics, so that's obviously changed dramatically for the companies that we interact with, but just curious if anyone has a take on it.
Yeah, well, I don't know that it's different at Samsung than anywhere else. It really depends on what you apply your AI, definitely technology, right? So if it's a vision or voice, or I think we probably have a team of engineers that are going to look at the technology in a way that are much more expert. In science, in imaging or diagnostic, or to accelerate I hear a lot, to accelerate R&D research, to leverage data sets and everything. I think the logic behind the development of the algorithm is robust. And like everybody else, we have to make due diligence in a way that we are conducting ourselves. Then it's really back to how is it going to be useful, how much are we going to make on the market, or is it saving lives?
Right, yeah, no, fair enough. And yeah, and I think, equipment, lab equipment or med tech, in skincare, in health systems, how are you seeing the infiltration of artificial intelligence and changing the way that you or your colleagues think about things?
So I feel pretty much the same. I'll just add just one comment that I think AI, like other terms, is often is used unnecessarily, and it's quite obvious to see that. So when it is that deep learning, so you have to be careful with that, because when it is viewed that it's unnecessarily used AI, and when you see that there's no feedback loop to feed the AI, it's just too obvious.
It's basically, let's say, internally can be used to make better products or to make products faster. That's one thing. Or it's part of the product we sell. Somehow, let's say, it's more and more that we cannot sell a product itself. It's usually now coming with a service or an entire ecosystem. So, and then,
Can you
of course,
give an example?
let's say, sun protection. So you can have a little UV sensor stick to your fingernail, which is collecting real-time UV exposure data. This transmits it to your app on the phone, where you can scan the barcode of your product, and it's connected with weather data and GPS location data, and probably with somebody like a Samsung Watch or an Apple Watch, you have behavior data, and then you get your personalized product at the time and at the point you use it. So you build up an entire ecosystem. It's not, let's say, putting just a bottle of sunscreen in the shelf and sell it. Let's say, make a nice TV spot and that's it. So it's far more, and this refers to almost every product.
For us, I think, there's some clinicians that fear the AI, saying that you're trying to take over our jobs kind of deal. But I think from the clinician side, I think anything that helps make them more efficient. There's, of course, more people than there are clinicians, and any way that you can help them be more efficient to diagnose, radiology is very easy because you have a very standardized data set. The images are the same across the board, so you can analyze that and help them perform their jobs better, faster. So making our clinicians more efficient is, one sort of AI line of thought, and that we look at, a lot of companies in that area. But two, of course, taking our data, our unstructured data, especially in the EMR and all that stuff, and even personal information that the patients can provide themselves to, then how do we treat them better? Better treatments or better tracking or all that. And so there may be AI embedded within our EMR to do that. So those are the two kind of storylines, if you will, I think, that for the health system right now.
Do you have a chief data officer or a group?
No, we don't particularly have that. I think,
I know some health systems are starting.
Correct, yeah, I think that's important. I think it's kind of rolls up into we have OCIO, which is Office of Clinical Informatics, which is sort of like that. His job is how do we manage our, own EMR system. And of course, we have our own chief CTO, Chief Technology Officer, as well. So, their jobs is to focus on that, but yes, that's important.
5 minutes left, go ahead.
I asked a version of this question in the morning, but I think it applies here too. So if it's a financial sponsor, it's easy to measure success, just return on investment. For you guys, how do you guys measure success at the end of the year? How do you guys gauge yourselves? I mean, your strategics. So, how do you do that?
I think
Yeah.
it's a combination. I think it's hard to say. I mean, financial is definitely one, realizations, or at least mark-to-markets, those are, typical what a fund would do in terms of the investments. I think overall, there are strategic goals. I think they're a little bit more amorphous, and it just depends on, by investment, what have they done? Have they entered in a contract? Has they developed on ROI? Those type of things, I think that are more sort of in the realm of the operations that you can combine the two and measure. We've had a couple, one realization and also implementations of different of the technologies. So, we started investing, maybe 18 months ago, so it's still ongoing in terms of figuring all that out.
At the end of the day, we measure the sales of the products out of these investments in the market. That's the ultimate KPI, and in front of that, because it can take years or many years, then we use the same figures Jeffrey just mentioned.
Same.
For me, the way I see it is that the company we invest in is going to have a spot in a kind of a Samsung ecosystem, either as a supplier, provider, customer, or assets that are being internalized or participate to the pipe or being sold ultimately. So it's any business outcome that's going to be favorable for the Samsung conglomerate, but it's going to work only if the company, of course, is successful.
Hi, I'm Rose. I'm from Rice University. I'm currently still a master's student, and my question will be because I'm interested in doing the jobs like venture capital. So, is there any advice or recommendation that you can provide for me? I already have internship in venture capitals, and I'm still learning about something about like due diligence and analysts. Thank you so much.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to jump. I think you're doing the right thing. You're at the right place and good room. And so continue to try to find exposures in any way you can, like in any capacity.
So, is there any course I need to take about like certifications or license in like financial? Because my background will be more medical science and engineering. So I have no like financial background.
It helps.
It helps.
I think also, in life science venture investing, the subject matter is so critical. So for me personally, I'm still relatively early in my career, but I came from the science side and then learned the business on the way. So of course, exposure, courses, this all helps, but really understanding fundamentally the life science industry, which is so nuanced. And just understanding the different types of venture capital, even, there's corporate venture, there's traditional venture, there's crossover fund there. There's so many different, facets, just really understanding, the ecosystem, how it functions, and looking at trends, I think, certainly over the past 5 years, 10 years, and what cycles look like. Understanding, where we're at now, I think will just make you that much more savvy. I think you can learn about venture academically, but I think it's so incredibly nuanced that the more exposure that you can get on the ground through internships and other things, and attending conferences like this and hearing different people talk will help.
I think we have people from both sides, let's say with the scientific background and with the financial background. Usually what we see is it's easier to train scientists on venturing than finance guys on science. That's much more difficult. So, but at the end of the day, you work in cross-functional teams where everybody brings his expertise in, and as mentioned, trying to get internships and be part of these, let's say, teams, and it's learning by doing, I think, because every case is different. So there is no one-size-fits-all. From an academic point of view, I think it's pretty difficult. I think you have to be exposed to as many cases as possible, and with everyone you will learn something new.
Alrighty, well, we're at 2:50. Thank you so much for the panel. Thank you for attending.